So we're only 3 minutes behind, which is pretty good. So hi, everyone, and thank you for joining this session. We're happy to have you all here today. The session is co-hosted by UNESCO's Disaster Risk Reduction Unit and also the Building Regulation for Resilience Program, which sits under the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery at the World Bank. And in this session, we are going to focus on the practical ways that countries can improve the resilience of the built environment through regulatory and institutional reforms. And we'll get a sense of what the World Bank and UNESCO are doing to support countries in this area. And then we'll hear some practical examples from Zanzibar, the Maldives, and Guatemala. So why don't we jump right in? I'm going to turn it over to Soichiro Yasukawa, who is the Chief of Disaster Risk Reduction at UNESCO, and I will hand it over to you, Soichiro. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Today, I would like to share with you what UNESCO is doing on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, and then I want to share with you what we do on the built environment. So UNESCO is a UN organization which has a mandate on natural social science, education, culture, communication, information. And utilizing this wide mandate, UNESCO takes the following approaches on DRR and climate change. The first one is a multidisciplinary. Okay. I hope you can hear me. So UNESCO is a UN organization which has a wide mandate, which has a mandate on the natural social science, education, culture, communication, information, and UNESCO takes the following approaches on DRR and climate change adaptation. First one is a multidisciplinary approach. Yes, we have a different mandate of UNESCO, and we also work on the multi-hazard approach. We work on flood, drought, earthquake, tsunami, and so on. And also we work on the multi-stakeholder participatory approach. We not only work with the government, but also with the academics or civil societies, including gender and youth. As you see on the right side, UNESCO works on 8 different thematic topics. One of them is the built environment, as you see on the right side.
Soichiro, sorry, could you speak up a little bit? I think some people are not hearing well. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe I might need to use my camera. Can you hear me well, or should I use a microphone?
No, you can just continue, but maybe speak out a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So before going to the built environment, I want to share with you one data. This is a number of disasters in the past 20 years, and also the number of deaths in the past 20 years. If you look at the numbers of hazards, yes, weather-related hazard, flood, storm, etc., is more than 90%. On the contrary, if you look at the number of deaths, the earthquake is the most devastating hazard among natural hazards. So, what is a built environment? So, built environment is a human-made surroundings for people to do activities and living and so on, which not only includes a building, but also green spaces or infrastructures or cities or neighborhoods. So what are the tools for the safer built environment? First one is a technical regulations such as building code, materials, and also the regulation of the constructions. But we also need a social system like regulations, building control, retrofitting policies, or training on the engineers. I hope you can hear me. So UNESCO, we work with different expert networks, international and regional, so that the experts can share their knowledge, exchange their knowledge to come up with new solutions. I share with you one or two projects of UNESCO on the built environment, which we are working in Latin American Caribbean right now. I invite Fernando, our expert, who is sharing with us examples of the component one you see on the screen, which is on the safer houses by communities, because in many cases, communities build their own houses without engineering background, and would like to train the local masons how to build a safer buildings. So this is more like a technical component. We also work on the social system component, which is on the component component 4, which is on the policy or practice reviews. We look at the different policies on building control system, land use system, licensing system, also the practices to make sure that the science is reflected into the regulations. So this is going to be my last slide. UNESCO also has a system to dispatch seismologists and seismic engineers to the earthquake stricken areas to see the collapsed building, to identify the hidden cause of the building collapse by using computer analysis and so on. So by this, we make a recommendation to the policymakers on the building regulations as well as the designing practices. So this is all from my side, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Soichiro. Very interesting to hear more about what UNESCO is doing to help reduce disaster risks in the built environment. So now why don't we turn over to Keiko Sakota, who is a senior disaster risk management specialist at the World Bank, and she's also leading the implementation of the Building Regulation for Resilience program. So Keiko, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Keiko, and I'm leading a global program called Building Regulation for Resilience together with Anna Campos, and Melody is one of our colleagues. And thank you so much for joining us today. It was really interesting to learn about how UNESCO is seeing the entire DRM engagements. And of course, as you can imagine, the World Bank is also having like a greater engagement beyond this built environment engagement. And of course, even within the built environment, we have different kind of engagement. Our global program is focusing on supporting the countries to improve the building regulatory framework and implementation mechanism. So I'm going to share some of our activities. So our program aim is to build the resilient and sustainable built environment through the promotion of effective and risk-informed building regulatory framework and implementation capacity. And when our program started in 2016, we started with the safety and resilience angle. But over the time, we also started to notice the growing demand of energy efficiency, which is green, and universal accessibility, which is inclusive element of the built environment. So we are now trying to build our kind of capacity in all these like three areas. And we provide the technical assistance to improve the regulatory framework and also train people to improve the implementation capacity. We also support the policy reform to enable these different kind of instruments. I would like to step back a little bit and talk about why we invest in building the regulatory framework and capacity. The simple answer is because it's very cost effective. Based on the study, we already know that $1 investment to improve the building regulatory framework is making $13 profit or benefit by saving the people's life and also the properties. And also from the example of Japan, we also know the buildings built according to the latest standards are saving more people's lives. And also the compliance cost can be lower if you're complying with the latest building code. So it really makes sense to invest in the building regulation to maximize the resilience of the built environment. And we also see other benefits. What you see here, the triangle image here, is a kind of typical image of building the regulatory framework. And the green part is mandatory kind of legal instrument, and the below in orange square or something which is supporting this implementation of these legal instruments. And by providing this kind of clear building regulatory framework, we can establish the minimum standard people need to follow. And that by doing so, we can reduce the uncertainty of not knowing or not clear about what they need to do or what people needs to follow in terms of building design and construction, and facilitate the better compliance capacity or better compliance practices. And that would further enhance the transparency and minimize the knowledge gap of the industry. And all in all, this will contribute to a more green, safe, and inclusive built environment. And as I mentioned, our program started in 2016, and we started to develop different kind of global knowledge. At the same time, we started to engage different kind of countries. One of the iconic tools that we developed is building regulatory capacity assessment methodology, the second one, which we published 2017. This is a methodology we usually use as an entry point to engage with clients or government agencies. We also started to learn about different global examples, including Japan, where we see a kind of great history of improvement of building regulation, and also the increase of the actual resilience of the built environment over the time. And as you see below, you see that we have the expansion of the global coverage of countries that we are working on. And this is the typical steps that we take when we are engaging in new countries. And as I mentioned earlier, we usually do the scoping dialogue, and then the initial step is a diagnosis. And we use this building regulatory capacity assessment tools to understand what is the existing regulatory framework and what is a legal and regulatory institutional arrangement, and what kind of capacity exists in the national and local government to implement the building regulatory framework. And based on those diagnostics, we come up with a set of recommendation, and we do the workshop with the government, and then the government are the one who prioritize the activities. And then we provide implementation support of selected priority activities. And today we have Maldives and Zanzibar, which went through all this process, and now they're under the implementation process. So I'm concluding my presentation, and now we have almost like a 20 country engagements, and then the engagement opportunities are growing. So if there's any countries interested in, or if you're from any companies or academic institution which might be interested in collaborating with us, please do not please do reach out to us for any further conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keiko, for sharing more about what the Building Regulation for Resilience program is doing to help countries improve their resilience in the built environment. So next we have Director Muchi Juma Amer, who is the Director of Urban and Rural Planning in the Ministry of Lands and Housing Development in Zanzibar. And he's going to share with us more about what Zanzibar is doing to strengthen the resilience of the built environment. So Director Muchi, can I turn it over to you? And Keiko, I think you were gonna, help me with the screen share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen from all parts of the world. I hope you are well in a good health. My name is Muchi Juma Amer, Director of Urban and Rural Planning, and I'm very happy and excited to be part of this session stated that towards safer built environment, risk-informed policy making and implementation, especially on reducing disaster risks in the built environment. So for today, I will just talk a little bit about learnings from Zanzibar, sharing experiences in developing a national building accord. So for the agenda today, it will be like 5 agendas, starting from the country context, project background, implementation environment, the journey for development of the building code, and good story to begin in the bigger picture. Zanzibar itself is an archipelago of 2 islands located in the east coast of Tanzania, with a total area of 2,654 square kilometers, and it is well known that it comprises of 2 islands. of Unguja and Pemba with other 57 islets. And administrational, it has five regions, 3 regions in Unguja and 2 regions in Pemba, with now a population of 1.8 million people, which comes from the census of 2022. And mostly it shows that women are a lot. Likely it's about 51% on the total population. And for the climate itself, Zanzibar right now we're experiencing different climate, depends on the season. In the mid-March we have the rainy season that causes flood. A few parts of Pemba experiencing landslides, high winds and coastal erosion in almost lowland part of the islands. So right now the government itself is aimed to start developing a new code by involving different stakeholders from its institutions and departments, so we can establish a building code that we can follow in all our construction models. So next we have the building code preparation. Likely this is the continuation of the Big Z support, and right now it is on the strengthening institutions for urban management and encouraging innovation. And for the implementation environment, right now we are in the code development, and mostly we are involving the different the departments and proper stakeholders to give their input, so we can generate a building code that can be user friendly according to our context. And on the legislative framework, since we have the outdated Town and Country Planning Act that formulated in 1955. Previously, we also have the act from 1929 with the CAP 79, which also guide the buildings and regulations. So right now we see that it's a good chance to add the building code and get the chance to do the review of this act that we have, which are almost outdated. So there are various levels of planning and building design with relation to the building environment. The comprising team from different disciplines, we can use them to create a new building code that will link all sectors concerning planning, guidelines, and environment that will be under planning department as a leader. So on the number 9, on the journey, currently we are starting on the process and have just started preliminary stages. So with the help from ARUP as an external advisory, we started our journey and had chance to create steering committee with various directors from respective government institutions, technical committee, and gather all important stakeholders who had chance to give their challenges, inputs, and suggestions. So on this journey, we succeed to prepare the draft of TOR for building code document, and this came from the different consultations from our external advisory. Thank a lot to Kiko and Christina and others. And there will be some different stages and approvals to be taken while we are on the way of creating this building code. So there are different type of topics that we discussed. This includes the process to assist on identify the case studies, different case studies from different countries that will share at least a kind of a same context, especially the island context, and roles to understand the roles of stakeholders, objectives, as well as to reserve the room for innovation and creativity. So there are different key decisions made. Some few selected parameters for code development have been working on hybrid approach for involving external consultants to our team. So this came by adopting the existing documents from different disciplines, and that help us on achieving the code development process. So other parameters are still to be defined, because we are still gathering some informations that will help on code development. There we have like 7 to 9 items on the structure of the draft of building code. So all these are very important tools to be elaborated in the document as to give significance of the building code. So starting from the structure, fire, indoor environment, building services, moisture, safety and accessibility, green building guidelines, and building life cycle for the construction materials. So these were among the things that we include as a main topics for the building code development. So there are different lessons and takeaways from the sessions of the workshops that we made together with the help of ARUP. And these are like the necessary, we saw that there is a necessary to review the local context in detail from the data that we have, and even the documents which are outdated. So there's a need to review those type of documents. And another thing, like a lessons, is an inclusive approach with relevant stakeholders is imperative to ensure the process is ordered and implementation is done sustainably. Because we have already seen some other countries' process are available, so we just had their document to put like for examples. And for the importance of capacity building, especially at the beginning of the new code implementation stage, is actually found it is very important for both private and public sectors, because we're all in the need of this capacity. So we can have the capacity just to introduce the building code and how we can prepare it and use it. So thank you very much. I have already finished my a little bit of the introduction and in the presentation itself. So I really appreciate the involvement of ARUP, especially Keiko, Christina, and others on the physical and virtual engagement for the whole time, for directive that they shared to our team, for the whole sessions and the workshop that we made together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director Mucci, for sharing some of the journey in Zanzibar on building regulatory reform. And I hope that generated some ideas for the audience for what's possible in their own countries. So now, why don't we turn it over to Fernando Castañaza, who is a consultant with UNESCO, and he's going to share some of his experience working in Guatemala. Fernando, over to you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Oh, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are listening. I'd like to have the opportunity to share the construction built environment for the small-scale houses in Guatemala. Guatemala is located in Central America in the south border of Mexico, with an estimated population for 50 million of people and almost 4 million houses. It's a multi-hazard country with earthquakes, hurricanes, and floods, and is home of volcanoes. Guatemala is a country with high vulnerabilities and exposure, with a weak local disaster risk reduction strategy, a perfect recipe for disaster. Guatemala is located near the Caucasus, North America, and Caribbean plate junction. The Caucasus plate is being subducted underneath the other two plates along the Middle American Trench. Both structures have been the source of large and damaging earthquakes. National experts from AGIES, Guatemalan Association of Structural and Seismic Engineering, have been developing a methodology that considers zones with high concentration of stress, known as seismic gap, and what generate a seismic threat map. These important zones have not produced an earthquake yet, but can happen in any moment. As you can see in the figure on the right, it matches with the zone with a higher concentration of houses and people. There are national efforts to enhance the built environment in the country. AGIES has developed standards for the design, construction, and supervision the building process, including consideration for the quality of the material used. These standards are used by engineers and architects of buildings more than 300 square meters. However, their application is not yet mandatory throughout the country. The government and all actors involved in the construction housing environment developed since 2017 a National Housing and Human Settlement Policies proposal for 2019 to 2032. Afterwards, a lighter version was presented for the period 2020 to 2032, but it's not yet approval for the government. The study performance needed a background check. Therefore, some international approaches were found since 2004 when Japanese experts came and modeled the faults, making simulation of a seismic event and showing in maps the affected areas in the Mercalli scale. Since 2014, with the support of the United States Office of Disaster Assistance, USAID ODA, the improvement of neighbor in peripheral areas of the cities in hillside areas identified as high risk is promoted in the project now as Barrio Mio Scale Up. Even more recently, USAID BHA and executed by Miyamoto International is the training program for rescue personnel and emergency to improve responses to earthquakes, PREPARE. That modeled the structural behavior in case of earthquakes of different types of building in an area of two cities in the country center. And the Embassy of Japan and the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, are working to detect new disaster risk points in Guatemala using satellite data, and hand-in-hand with the company Sinspec, the approaches use the off-remote sensor to detect landslide and skin holes. And another good example is UNESCO Berlak project, which was already mentioned by Soichiro Iskawa. UNESCO has launched a project, Disaster Risk Reduction, strengthening capacity for disaster risk reduction in the built environment in Latin America and Caribbean, including Guatemala, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Mexico, and Peru. This project will be carried out with South-South cooperation and with the collaboration of Japanese experts. Berlak is working on Component 1 and 4 in Guatemala. I have been working on the ongoing Component 1, which objective is to help security safer new small-scale houses. We review the regulation related to the construction of small-scale housing, evaluation of the role of the municipalities in the construction of the small house. Then we will develop and disseminate user-friendly guidelines for builders and municipal technicians responsible for construction control. Review regulation and practices on earthquake DRR related to all the buildings types. Develop policies with the potential to generate positive change in the configuration of the built environment. Part of the advances on Component 1 have been analyzed in the construction built environment in the four indispensable sections. First, the knowledge on application of public policies and designs and construction and small-scale houses at the local level. 2, the public laws and local regulation for authorization of construction license. 3, the level or organization that within the local government must adequately monitor compliance with the regulation. This implies having quality and sufficient personnel, financial resources to implement control mechanisms, clear procedures, personnel training, and hierarchical structure. And fourth, technicians must know construction techniques, building analysis methodologies, technical instruments for 5 tests. The results of the analysis is shown as traffic light in yellow, where there is some progress, and in red, where no progress has been made and is necessarily and timely to intervene. Next steps. Develop a user-friendly guideline for builders for safer small houses, and that includes all the phases of the construction, design, build, and supervision, for example. Dissemination, e.g. workshop of the guideline, and developing policies with potential to generate positive change in the configuration of the built environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. It was really great to hear a very practical example of what UNESCO is doing on the ground in Guatemala. So now for our final presentation is from Ms. Fatima Shaufa, who is the Director of the Construction Regulations and Standards section under the Construction Industry Development Department within the government of the Maldives. And unfortunately, due to time zone differences, I think it's about midnight there, she is unable to join the session, but she has recorded it for us. And I am going to ask Keiko if she can go ahead and share that presentation now.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings to you, ladies and gentlemen from Maldives. I would like to first thank World Bank for this opportunity to meet with you here. My name is Fatima Shaufa. I'm from the Construction Regulation and Standards section of the Ministry of National Planning, Housing and Infrastructure of Maldives. Today, I meet you here to give some information on the ongoing reform for the construction sector in the Maldives that we have been carrying out with the assistance of the World Bank. When we look at Maldives, Maldives is a country located in Asia near to India and Sri Lanka. We are a group of island nations that has been grouped into atolls. We have 20 administrative atolls, 187 inhabited islands, and 400,000 people. This is a typical atoll where you see the names are located for each island. The green parts are the islands. And this is a typical island. We are surrounded by the sea on all sides. When we look at the main ongoing reform efforts and timeline, let's first have a look at the timeline. Initially, we had started developing the building code in 2008. And however, due to some changes in the constitution, we were not able to bring out the building code unless it's under an act. The act was gazetted and implemented in 2017, and the regulations were brought out in January and March of 2019, including the building code. However, the compliance documents still need to be gazetted. The efforts with the World Bank started in January 2019 with the Building Regulatory Capacity Analysis, which started from January 2019 and went up to August 2020. As a result of this, we have started the construction approval reform process in June 2021. And the review of the draft compliance documents in 2022. As part of the approval process reform, we are currently we have completed the review of the as-is process, and now we have designed the to-be process for the construction approval. We are currently developing the TR for the system, and design of the e-permit solution, digitalization, as well as the capacity building program and the deployment of the e-permit solution and training is still to be carried out. Let's look at some of the details. The building regulatory capacity analysis, the purpose was to identify the lacks in the building regulatory framework and the lacks of implementation. Consultations were carried out with stakeholders, and needs were identified on how to improve the existing framework and opportunities for improvements of implementation. Some of the key challenges identified include the insufficient capacity of the local authorities for the implementation of the regulations, such as the human resource limitations, as well as hardware limitations. Gaps in building regulations and land use plans were identified, and lack of reference standards, that's the compliance documents, need to be developed for implementation of the building code. This was also identified. As a result of this analysis, we were able to identify two main areas that needs three main areas was identified, and two of those areas that relate to the building sector are the code compliance development and electronic permitting process development. As mentioned earlier, the construction permit process reform, we have completed the ASIS process. We have developed the 2B process, which includes 13 services. And this process, we are optimizing towards space system, where the localization height and the building usage will be considered. We have a design implementation plan, which would include a roadmap for the design and deployment of the e-permit software, development of training materials, capacity development, and we have identified in this plan that communication and sensitization campaigns are also needed. When we look at the code compliance documents to be developed under the building code, we have, with the World Bank assistance, reviewed 12 drafts of 12 documents under the assistance of the World Bank. There's a need for resilient construction in the Maldives, and low elevation hazard vulnerability and rising urbanization are key factors that need to be incorporated into the design or considerations for the building code development. Building codes will be a key tool for the disaster risk reduction and climate change mitigation efforts. It will be locally led and tailored to our climate to ensure adaptability. Lessons and takeaways from these works include the importance of the local context due to the geography. Our geography is very different to maybe most of the countries around in the world. We are surrounded by the sea and we are a low-lying nation. Importance of capacity building and training are needed for the building consent authorities as well as practitioners in the industry. An inclusive approach with all the stakeholders involved is important to ensure the sustainability of the reforms and to ensure that they also feel that they are also part of this reform. Ensure that buildings-related reforms are not a one-time activity, but shall continue in the future in connection with other support, including communication, sensitization campaigns, monitoring and evaluation maintenance, etc. Although we have started this effort after the development, we understand that it will need to continually be developed further in the future. Other countries and their specific experiences can provide valuable insights and challenges faced, but also opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So yes, let's open it up for Q&A. And so from the audience, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. And I see that we have one from Catherine Coates, who is also a member of our team. And this question is for Director Mucci in Zanzibar. And we'd be curious if you could tell us a bit more about what the stakeholder consultations look like during the code development process. Could you give us a bit more information and nuance and details on what that looked like?
Thank you very much. Thank you again, Melody, and everybody. For the stakeholders' involvement, what we did first, it was on the how we choose to collaborate with different stakeholders from the government institutions and the private sectors. So what we intended to do, it was to gather different institutions to get different type of challenges they are facing, and because we know that they are in different disciplines. So those type of stakeholders help us to gather different type of we can say different type of solutions that we can add to develop these building codes. Because as you for example, we involve the private sectors who are concerning the construction with the construction industry. So they gave us some of the challenges where they getting different type of materials, or other stakeholders coming from the local construction industries, the type of the type of materials they use, the knowledge that they have on pursuing the different type of construction. So these different stakeholders help us to achieve kind of a building code that will be specific for the context, because we are supposed that their inputs, they will help us to come with a building code that will be user friendly and affordable. So yeah, likely the involvement of different stakeholders, I can say it's very important to get different ideas from them, and we use those ideas to generate the development of building code that can be significant and efficient to our country. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for sharing about how you kind of took a comprehensive approach in Zanzibar to engaging all relevant stakeholders. So right now, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, but I think it might be interesting for each of the speakers.
I see in QA section. I see one question from Ron on the QA tab. Ron, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, go.
Yeah, I think your question is definitely important. You mentioned that, the building code is good tools to, address the issue of new buildings, but what about the existing buildings? And I think maybe we can hear from I don't know, maybe Fernando, maybe you could talk, and then also Director Muchi, maybe you could also talk, because Zanzibar is known for Stone Town, which is like a very big, traditional, which is a kind of traditional buildings. And then the new building code is also addressing, to be honest, Zanzibar has a Stone Town conservation guideline produced by the UNESCO, but there are many more, historical buildings beyond the UNESCO qualified buildings. And the government is trying to regulate and strengthen the resilience of those buildings as part of the new building code. So this is also covering the existing old historical building to strengthen the resilience of those of them. Director Muchi, would you like to add anything on that?
Thank you. Actually, it's very interesting topic on this existing type of buildings, because especially we have the old heritage site, famous name of the Stone Town conservation area, and most of the buildings built in the 15th century. So we expect even the material used is very different concerning the nowadays innovation and intervention. So for this type of buildings, we concern more about the skills and craftsmanship, even the material, because they are using stones, they are using lime, they are using there's not much use of the steel, something like that. So we intend to use the local craftsmen that can help us also to understand the methodologies that can be used for constructions, or even doing the renovations for this type of buildings, especially in the heritage areas and heritage sites. For those type of buildings, they can be comparable with the local buildings that we have in Zanzibar. most of them are not in the high, you can say, in the modern quality or modern design system. So for those type of buildings, we have to include the guidelines that will be more useful for those type of buildings, especially for the type of building that are using local available materials, and for the type which are in the heritage sites, and they can have their own type of skills and workmanship needed. So that's my concern.
Also, I recall that we had a conversation in Zanzibar to include the section of the building maintenance across the building life cycle, because there are some risky building which needs to be demolished, and then that was a kind of that is already in practice. So I think, and also along that line, I think we also discussed the needs of guidance for the retrofitting, etc. So I think, yeah, definitely the new building code would also provide some guidance for the existing buildings. Thank you, Ron, for the question. Fernando, would you like to complement something through your engagement?
Well, thank you. In Guatemala, we are working with a group of experts in adapt and evaluation of damage after the earthquake. But we need to help for the build that are constructed now. All the production is for the new construction, but never are working in the build that we built after the earthquake in 1976 is the big one, and after this, many construction, many disorder in the construction. So we need to regulate all these works. When a people, one of us want to place or house, there are no code of construction applies. So it need to work in this line too, but the government right now is not help us to do.
Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, see another question coming in from Maria. So how do you ensure inclusion during the development of the new building code, women with disabilities, youth, etc.? Keiko, I think you've done a lot of work developing tools around that and supporting those kinds of efforts. Can you speak to that a bit more about what an inclusive building code development process looks like?
Yeah, happy to. So the build integration program that we're working on. So we are developing the tools. It's a kind of checklist of the the code contents. So we are developing the checklist of what kind of topic or what kind of provision should be included in the building code from different angle, including structural stability point of view, fire safety point of view, and energy efficiency point of view. And the another one which we are working on is inclusion or universal accessibility point of view. And we have been comparing, I think, almost 12 or 13 countries universal access code to see what are most important provision included in different countries. And we are also analyzing what kind of policy making is incentivizing the people to really invest in universally accessible built environment. Because having provision in building code is one, but to implement is another big jump. And we also need to make sure that it really create a kind of benefit for people, not only people who has disability, but pregnant women, elderly, children. We all need to think about different people with different capability and different situation. And tomorrow you could be person with disability or person with some mobility issue. So it's always important for us to think about the same topic but from different angle. And we hope, and I also remember in Zanzibar, we had a representative from the Commission of People with Disability, and she was very vocal about, this topic. So Director Muchi, would you like to speak about that a little bit? Sorry to put you in the spot.
Thank you, Kiko. I think you have already explained all of it, and it's better that you remind me about the checklist, especially on the universal accessibility. So we need to introduce this in all the buildings, especially public buildings, schools, hospitals. But I remember we had the discussion about the high-rise building, not high-rise, but starting from the 3 floors to 4 floors buildings. We need to at least to put the regulation and guidelines that we need to put the ramp so that people can maneuver, can go around without using for the building that doesn't have the lift. Otherwise, we will have only the ground floor to be useful for the children and those with the disabilities because they cannot climb the stairs. So yeah, it's very important to put them in considerations because, as you said, they have their representatives and they are very powerful. And right now we need to include everyone. So we don't need to put anyone behind. So it's very important that you raise this concern.
Thank you for your powerful message. Over to you, Melody.
Thank you. And thank you for the question, because I think this isn't talked about enough. And we often focus, when we're thinking about the building code, we're focusing on the structural safety issues and not thinking about who the buildings are serving. So it's great to hear about what the BRR program is delivering to help countries implement on that. And then it's also great to hear what Zanzibar is doing in that regard. So I see we have about a minute left. So why don't I turn it over to Soichiro to give us some conclusions, some concluding remarks on the session, and some key takeaways for the audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, panelists and also the participants, and also the GFDRR who co-organized these sessions. No, there are many. Built environment safety includes a lot of things, and I cannot summarize in just in 1 minute. But I think today we talked a lot of issues we can take over. I think, first of all, this program for GFDRR, it's very comprehensive. Not only the safety, but also green or inclusive, I think, which we also need to think about. Build environment is just not for the safety. I think we need to be green, etc. And from the presentation from the Zanzibar, yes, I think stakeholder engagement is very important, because if the regulation is a mandatory, I think the regulation needs to have a social consensus. So without engaging to the stakeholders, individuals or businesses, we cannot just make what scientists says. So I think it's really like a communication process, co-designing to make a mandatory regulations. But at the same time, I think Guatemala, which UNESCO is working on, we also try to be practical. Yes, if we want to aim higher, but at the same time, it might take time. So we also need to think about the practicality, how we make the result very quickly to save lives. And I think in a question of the retrofit, yes, it's very important issues, because among the building stock, 99% is a building stock. So how we make it safer in case of the disasters. And this is a very challenging issues, even like United States or Japan, which have good regulations on the retrofitting policies. Still, we need to rely on the public subsidy or financial incentives to encourage people to work on the retrofitting policies. I cannot summarize very in a short time on the retrofit, but for sure, retrofit is a big issue on the built environment. So I don't know if I can summarize it very well for the for the future actions, but these are the issues I found in these sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. And with that, that concludes our session. Thank you everyone to joining, and thank you to all the speakers and panelists for sharing their experiences and help shedding light on how to build more resilience in the built environment through regulatory reforms and capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Melody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Director. Thank you.